6 a.m. in the heart of Texas. The sun breaks over the horizon, but for Thomas Vance, the day is already over. 8 months of absolute back-breaking labor, sweat, and $38,000 in seed and fertilizer, completely erased in less than 6 hours. You stand there on your own porch, watching a sounder of 58 feral hogs shred your livelihood into dust. You throw flashbangs. You scream until your lungs burn. But here is the terrifying truth: they don't even flinch. They look you dead in the eye and resume chewing 3 seconds later. That is not just a nuisance, it is a psychological war. And Thomas is not alone. Look at this map. This is a quiet, devastating invasion sweeping across 35 states. 6 million wild hogs inflicting $1.5 billion in pure economic destruction every single year. It is an unstoppable biological war of attrition against the American farmer. If you want to understand how we fight back against an enemy that feels no fear, hit that subscribe button right now. Let us dive into the untold reality of the American super hog. To understand how we got here, you have to look at what we are actually fighting. Out here in the American heartland, we are no longer dealing with the lazy pink farm pigs from old children's books. We are up against a biological masterpiece of destruction, a creature often called the super hog. This is a deliberate, worst-case genetic collision between highly intelligent domestic swine that escaped captivity and the brutal, resilient Eurasian wild boars imported for hunting decades ago. When those two bloodlines crossed, nature created a tank. They inherited the massive, deep-digging skull and thick winter coat of the wild boar, combined with the extreme intelligence, high birth rates, and massive size of industrial farm pigs. They can weigh 300 pounds, sprint at 30 miles per hour, and clear a 5-foot fence like an Olympic hurdler. Where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments and let's explore together. Because whether you live in a rural county or a major suburb, this biological invasion is moving faster than anyone predicted. To see this genius in action, you only have to look at Marcus Webb, a 54-year-old landowner who learned the hard way that brute force does not work against these animals. Marcus spent an entire grueling autumn out in the blistering heat and freezing mud, single-handedly installing a heavy-duty, $18,000 electric fencing system around his prime acreage. He did everything by the book, using heavy-gauge wire, industrial chargers, and deep-set wooden posts. He thought he finally built an impenetrable fortress. But the very first night the power turned on, a massive sounder arrived. Marcus watched on his high-definition night vision cameras, expecting the first sharp shock to send them running back into the woods. Instead, he watched in absolute horror as his $18,000 investment failed spectacularly. The dominant sows did not run. They stood at the wire, took the high-voltage hits directly to their snouts, squealed in temporary pain, and then immediately began testing different sections of the line. Within 20 minutes, they figured out that if they used their thick, insulated tusks to push the bottom wire into the dirt, they could short out the entire system. They did not just bypass the fence, they dismantled it. This brings us to a groundbreaking 2023 study from Louisiana State University that completely flipped the script on how we understand wild pig behavior. For years, folks thought hogs were just stubborn or numb to pain. But LSU researchers discovered a shocking neurological biological bypass inside the feral hog's brain. When they mapped out the animal's brain chemistry, they found a highly abnormal neural architecture. In a standard mammal, the amygdala, which is the brain's fear and survival center, triggers a powerful flight response when it experiences pain or danger, like a sharp electric shock or a loud explosion. But in a feral hog, the reward processing center, fueled by an insatiable, evolutionary drive for caloric intake, possesses a direct neurological override over the amygdala. In plain English, their desire to eat completely shuts down their ability to feel fear. When a wild hog smells a field of high-calorie corn or sweet sugar cane, the brain floods with dopamine. If they encounter an electric fence or a booming deterrent, their brain does not register it as a deadly hazard to flee from. Instead, the neurological wiring processes the shock as a static data point. To them, the pain is simply a minor tax they have to pay to get to the prize. They view our most expensive deterrents as simple puzzles to be analyzed, adapted to, and ultimately solved. They learn the timing of our patrols, they memorize the layout of our traps, and they turn our own technology against us. To protect the land, American farmers had to stop trying to scare an animal that is biologically incapable of feeling fear. They had to learn to outthink them. There is a unique kind of bitterness that settles in your chest when you stand out in the quiet of the morning, running your hand along a brand new, shiny galvanized steel fence, knowing it did absolutely nothing to protect you. That was exactly where Marcus Webb found himself. He was looking at thousands of dollars of heavy metal, gleaming under the Texas sun, completely intact except for the ruined, muddy craters directly underneath it. The real gut punch came a few days later when a couple of state wildlife biologists came out to survey the damage. Marcus expected them to recommend a heavier gauge of steel or maybe a taller barrier. Instead, they dropped a truth bomb that nearly knocked him out. They told him that his expensive, beautifully engineered shiny fence was actually helping the hogs destroy his land. It was serving as a giant illuminated roadmap for the entire sounder. When you look at night vision trail cam footage, you can see this psychological nightmare playing out in real time. The pigs were not trying to smash through the heavy steel. Instead, they were walking casually right alongside it, using the bright, reflective metal as a visual guide. It functioned like a funnel, herding the entire sounder directly to the natural dips in the terrain, the softest creek beds, and the loose soil entry points where they could easily dig their way underneath. Have you ever spent hard-earned money trying to fix a problem, only to realize your solution was actually making things worse? Let me know in the comments below, because that kind of frustration will make any property owner want to pull their hair out. Marcus realized that by building a physical fortress, he had accidentally given his enemy a perfect navigational highway. To fix it, Marcus had to completely shift his strategy from heavy engineering to basic animal psychology, specifically focusing on the visual contrast theory. See, a feral hog's eyes do not function like yours or mine. They have terrible depth perception and struggle to identify solid, continuous geometric shapes. Instead, their entire visual processing system relies heavily on high contrast and light breaks. That shiny silver galvanized steel fence was practically glowing in the dark, casting sharp shadows and creating a massive, distinct line of contrast against the dark background of the woods. To a hog, that stark boundary line screamed that something valuable was being hidden on the other side. So, Marcus decided to use an invisible strategy. Instead of tearing the fence down or buying more expensive equipment, he went to the local hardware store and bought several gallons of cheap, matte black exterior paint. He and his son spent a weekend coating every single inch of that shiny metal until it looked like a shadow. Then, he went along the bottom 2 feet of the fence line and attached a solid, opaque debris barrier made of thick, dark landscaping fabric to eliminate any gaps where light could peek through. By doing this, he completely erased the visual contrast against the dark timber and the native soil. From a distance, the fence effectively vanished into the natural landscape. To the hogs, the bright, enticing border was gone, replaced by a solid wall of darkness that offered no visual cues, no light breaks, and no structural hints to follow. The payoff was immediate and deeply satisfying. This incredibly simple, low-tech modification cost Marcus less than $200 in total materials. Yet, it achieved what an $18,000 high-voltage system could not. The weekly intrusions on his property instantly dropped from a frustrating 4 times a week down to absolute 0. By understanding how the enemy perceived the world, Marcus stopped fighting their physical strength and started exploiting their biological limitations. But keeping them away from the fence was only the first step. The next challenge was figuring out how to handle the massive hungry sounders still lingering just outside his property lines, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Once you realize you can render your property invisible to a hog's eyes, you quickly run into a much bigger problem. You cannot paint a smell. If you lift an aerial drone up over the sprawling sugarcane fields of the south, you look down at a sea of green stretching for miles. But if you could see the world through a hog's nose, that entire landscape would look like a swirling, vibrant map of glowing neon light. For months, Marcus Webb had been desperately trying to hide the heavy, sweet aroma of his ripening crops. He tried spraying chemical masks, cleaning his equipment obsessively, and changing his walking paths. None of it mattered. The pigs always knew exactly where the food was, and they knew exactly when Marcus left for the night. To understand why Marcus was failing so miserably, you have to look at some incredible research coming out of Australia's chief scientific agency, CSIRO. Their wildlife biologists discovered that feral hogs possess a highly sophisticated, enlarged olfactory bulb that does something way beyond just smelling food, or capable of complex spatio-temporal mapping. What does that mean in plain terms? It means a wild hog doesn't just catch a scent and run toward it. They can analyze the microscopic degradation of a scent plume in the air and calculate time and distance. They can smell a human footprint or a tractor tire and know, down to the exact hour, how long ago that object passed by. They map out the entire landscape by scent and time, turning your daily routine into a predictable schedule they can easily exploit. What about you? Do you have an animal in your neck of the woods that seems to always outsmart your best efforts? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because dealing with an adversary this smart can make you question your own sanity. When Marcus read that Australian data, he had a massive breakthrough. He realized that trying to mask human odors or crop scents on a working farm was a fool's errand. You cannot fight biology. So instead of trying to hide the scent, he decided to weaponize it. He completely shifted his mindset from concealment to intentional behavioral redirection. If the hogs were going to use their noses to map out his property, Marcus was going to draw a new map for them, one that led straight to a dead end. The execution of this plan was pure genius. Marcus stopped treating his massive corral traps as hidden, passive cages. Instead, he turned them into the grand finale of a highly calculated scent corridor. He went out beyond the perimeter of his primary sugarcane fields and began creating a literal trail of smell. He started miles away from his actual crops, using a highly concentrated, sticky mix of fermented corn, sweet molasses, and diesel fuel, a scent cocktail that hogs find completely irresistible. He didn't just dump it all in one place. He laid down a precise, escalating gradient of odor. The scent started faint at the edge of the woods and grew progressively stronger, heavier, and more enticing as it wound its way through the timber, completely bypassing his vulnerable sugarcane fields. The trail ended deep inside a massive, open corral trap equipped with a cellular drop gate. To the hogs, following this scent corridor was not a trap, it was a logical progression of their own spatial mapping. They chose the path of least resistance and maximum reward. The results of this behavioral redirection were nothing short of miraculous. Marcus recorded 18 consecutive nights of absolute silence and zero crop intrusion in his fields. The entire sounder willingly marched right past the sugarcane, following the scent trail directly into the containment zone. By choosing to direct the animal rather than confront it, Marcus proved that a landowner's greatest asset is not a weapon, but an understanding of the wild. Guiding an entire sounder into a trap using their own sense of smell is a massive victory, but any seasoned landowner will tell you that the victory is short-lived if it burns you out completely. For the longest time, Marcus Webb was running himself into the ground. He was pulling grueling all-night shifts, sitting in a freezing deer stand, or walking the perimeter with thermal scopes at 2 in the morning, trying to catch the hogs in the act. He was completely exhausted, irritable, and running on pure caffeine, while the hogs always seemed to be one step ahead. It felt like a never-ending game of cat and mouse where the mouse was winning. Have you ever worked yourself to the bone trying to solve a problem on your property, sacrificing your sleep and sanity, only to feel like you are spinning your wheels? Drop a comment below and let me know your stories about battling burnout, because out here, that exhaustion is very real. Marcus finally caught a break when he stumbled across a fascinating piece of wildlife research from Auburn University. The researchers were studying the impact of hunting pressure on wild pig behavior, and what they found completely changed how Marcus managed his time. The data proved that feral hogs have a deeply hardwired circadian rhythm that is hard-coded right into their biology at the hormonal level, driven by intense spikes in cortisol and melatonin. When humans start hunting them heavily, shooting at them, or chasing them with dogs, the pigs do not leave the area, and they do not change their destination. Instead, their bodies simply adapt by shifting their entire activity cycle into razor-sharp, highly predictable nocturnal windows. They turn into ghosts that only operate when they know the woods are entirely dark and quiet. This biological clock was not a sign of random chaos. It was a rigid, clockwork schedule. Marcus realized that by patrolling the land at random hours, he was just stressing himself out while tipping off the hogs to his presence. He needed to work smarter, not harder. So, he made the executive decision to stop the exhausting midnight patrols completely. He hung up his boots at sundown, climbed into bed, and let technology do the heavy lifting. Marcus took his advanced, cell-connected smart traps and programmed the drop gate timers to activate exclusively during that peak biological window identified by the Auburn research, typically between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. The visual contrast was beautiful. On one side of a split-screen security monitor, you could see Marcus fast asleep in his warm bed at 2 a.m. On the other side, a massive sounder of 20-plus hogs was casually strolling right into the center of the corral trap, totally relaxed because the human element had disappeared from the woods. 3 seconds later, the automated cellular door dropped shut, securing the entire group at once. By aligning his defense tactics with the biological clock of the enemy, Marcus saw his trapping efficiency spike by a mind-blowing 340%. He was catching more pigs in a single automated drop than he used to catch in a whole month of active, miserable night hunting. But the best part of this precision strike strategy was the psychological reset it provided. The Auburn study noted that when an entire sounder is cleanly removed in a single event, it creates a massive power vacuum and a temporary behavioral freeze in the surrounding woods. For Marcus, every major capture bought him a peaceful reset window of 7 to 12 days of absolute unbroken quiet on his land. No rooting, no damaged fences, and no midnight alarms. It was proof that when you understand the internal clock of your adversary, you can finally reclaim your own peace of mind. Trapping and outsmarting these creatures brings peace today, but looking at a new litter of striped piglets on a trail cam reminds us of a hard truth. With a 150% annual reproduction rate, you cannot just shoot or trap your way out of this crisis long term. It is a never-ending treadmill. The real future lies in scientific innovations like Gonacon, a USDA-approved vaccine that stops the population boom at its root without the endless cycle of violence. The biggest lesson here extends far beyond the farm. In life, when faced with a massive, destructive force, brute force will only get you so far. The moment we stop fighting with anger and start leading with deep biological understanding, the land wins and we win. What is your biggest takeaway from Marcus and Rosa's journey? Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button to join our community and support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.